Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about wrist pain in Kendo. The most likely cause, the most likely way to address it. Now, I'm no medical expert, but I got to be honest, in this case, I don't think you really need to be. So unless you have some sort of underlying injury or historic issue that you've been dealing with, I do think that this is definitely going to be a solid help for you. That being said, if you do suffer from wrist pain in Kendo and you're doing your best to address it from a technical perspective and you're still continuing to have problems, there could be some other underlying issue that you need to see a medical expert for. So just bear that in mind. Like I said, not a medical expert, obviously, so there's only so far I can take you. But I can talk about the technical side and what I think could be at the heart of the issue and what's going to be a likely path to achieving pain-free Kendo in your wrists and your forearms. So really what this comes down to is it's going to be your grip, right? The way that you're holding the Shinai and the way that you're applying the Tenuchi. So the Tenuchi is your grip, right? So how do you apply your grip into the strike? Okay? So we're often told, I've got a Bokto here and I'll use this to show you, but we're often told to hold the sword and line the V of your hand up with the back of the sword. This is a good starting point for your grip, okay? But actually we need a bit more detail. So what often gets neglected when we talk about this is the position of the wrist bone, okay? This particular grip here, the way I'm holding it now, it looks like the V's are lined up with the back of the sword, with the mune. Okay, I'm using the Bokto because this is a much more clear way to demonstrate it. But really, this is actually not enough. Really, your hand needs your wrist bone needs to be over the top of the mune, okay, on both sides. So your left and your right. So this is actually too wide. Yeah, too wide this way. Equally, you don't want to bring your wrist bone across. Okay, this will restrict your movement. You won't be able to strike properly. Okay, but the wrist bone needs to intercept the center line. Okay, it's said if you do iaido or kenjutsu or anything where you do more sword handling and you're using Bokto and you're using iaito and you're using shinken, that's the sharp live Japanese sword, it's much more difficult to get away with this. In Kendo, it's much easier because you're holding the Shinai. Typically the Shinai are mostly round grip. Some of them may be octagonal, that might help. You've got the oval grip ones, they can be very helpful with this, but they don't suit everybody, okay, in terms of the way they want to actually go about using the Shinai, okay? Also, oval grip Shinai, once a stave breaks, it's harder to interchange the parts and things like that. There's little reasons why you might not want to use an oval grip one, but it can be helpful for studying this. Okay, the basic problem is if I open this grip, okay, so here's what it looks like from the side on the right hand. We're just going to study the right hand and then I'll show you the left hand. Okay, so if I'm holding it from the top, this is what it looks like. If I hold it slightly from the side, where I had just the V in my thumb, just that lined up, but I don't have the wrist bone over, okay? What happens at the end of the strike, we extend our wrists and our fingers, and if you watch the grip carefully, it starts to move alongside this thumb bone, okay? This is undesirable. I'll show you on the left hand side. So this is a correct grip, okay? With the Bokto, you don't hold it right at the end, okay? You leave a bit of space, because if this was a sword, you wouldn't be able to hold it from the end anyway, okay? Because Skagashiro is here, okay? If I hold it, so just the V is lined up in my thumb, but I haven't got my wrist bone over, this is what it looks like. As you extend into the strike, what starts to happen is this starts to move up and push all of this section up, okay? This whole section of your wrist. And so this commonly results in this kind of shape. Okay, I'll show you from the other side. You strike, and this happens. The left hand ends up coming alongside the right hand like this. This is very common to see in people's strikes. This is not what you want. What you want is this shape, okay? Forward and cut in, yeah, cutting into the target, not on top of the target as such. Okay, it's not, the path of the sword shouldn't be like this. The path of the sword is like this. Yeah, boom. Obviously, without hitting the mengane, the grill on the men, for example. Okay, so going back to this, really what I want to make sure is that I should be able to hold the sword with just my index finger, yeah, and this bone. Yeah, so it's seated underneath that thumb bone. So if my wrist is on top, then the sword will seat behind that thumb bone. That means I don't have to stop it, okay? If it moves alongside like this, it's not stable, okay? It's really yanking my arm up, but it's not stable. I don't have a strong structure behind the sword. The problem with that then is that you start having to use your forearm muscles an awful lot to try to control and stop and apply the snap of the cut, but also control it and stop the blade, or the shinai in this case. And what it means is that your forearm muscles start working extremely hard, but right at the moment where you're trying to use your forearm muscles and really like tense them up to control the weapon's also pulling them out of alignment and pulling them up. And so this will initially start usually as wrist pain first in the short term, because here's where all the tension and loading is. But in the long term, this is going to affect your whole forearm, and it's going to result in tennis elbow. Okay? So if you find yourself in this position, really the thing you need to work on is your grip. Now, I was sent this question by a person I know who plays Jordan. So they're doing a lot of the one-handed waza, one-handed katate waza. Okay? So what you need to work on in your Suburi, there's a good video by Chiba Sensei where he talks about Suburi and what's desirable, what's not desirable. And he'll show you that although you want a snap at the end of the cut, you know, you want that sharp saye, what you don't want to see is this wrist go like this. I'm exaggerating it so that you can see, but you don't want to see this, that shape. You want to see this shape. Okay? And so what can also help you to achieve this is understanding that through the dynamics of the cut, if the sword is being stopped because of the shape of the hand, you know, very easily that it's nestled into the base of the palm here, right, at the point where you stop. You should also understand that you should be using not just your wrists to generate the snap of the cut, but you should be using your fingers too. Okay, this is important. So really when the cut starts from the top, there's a little bit of loading here, okay, because the sword is leaning back. Especially in Jordan, this is evident. So there's already leverage in your little finger. All the other fingers should be quite loose and relaxed. And then I'm going to take my fingers off so that you can see the motion. But really what should be happening is it should be rolling, a rolling action, right, to get the sword on the move. And there's also this rolling action, whether it's a two-handed strike or a one-handed strike, there's this kind of rolling action into the snap at the end of the cut and the stop. Okay, so it takes a bit of coordination, but instead of thinking that everything is just the wrist, like how hard can I flick with my wrist, there is some wrist movement, but it's not like this. It's forward like that, forward, forward, forward. And instead what you want to do is have this rolling action of the fingers, and it's almost, instead of offering it's a difficult concept to explain, but I'm not doing this, right, where, yeah, like that. See how the wrist bone kind of starts to pop up. What I'm doing is forward, forward, offering my hand forward. Okay, and if I pair that with the shape of the grip, you get the strong snap, Tenuchi. The left hand stays lower than the right hand and stays at that solar plexus level. And even in the one-handed waza, this is still the case. Yeah. But this shape, that's where the left hand is in front of the solar plexus, whether it's Jordan or from Chudan, that is consistent. Okay, that same fundamental is present in both the one-handed cutting techniques and the two-handed cutting techniques. Okay, work on this and I promise you your wrist issues are going to subside considerably. It's going to take some getting used to. Something to bear in mind when you do the kote. Chiba Sensei used to say that when you're cutting the kote, obviously I'm standing doing this at men height, so I'll stand on my tippy toes. When you cut down, the thumb should be pointing down to the floor as if it was digging into the ground. Okay, so this is important. If your thumb is pointing out to the side, it's a good sign that your wrist is out of alignment with the sword. It's kind of out the way like this. You know, it should be in, like I said, get that wrist bone behind the back of the sword. You should be holding the sword from the top and the bottom, if that makes sense, or from behind and, you know, in front, not from the sides. Okay. Now, if you've got these wrist pain issues, and maybe they're starting to flare up into your forearms, Andy Fisher from Kendo actually covered this in one of his videos where he talked about his time training in, for Great British Squad when he was kind of at the peak of his competitive years. And there was a point where he really, really ramped up his training, and it resulted in basically tennis elbow. Okay, so he had this really, kind of what was becoming fast a chronic forearm pain issue. And you tried obviously a few different things, but what he ended up saying in the video is he basically got it's like a rubber twisting kind of thing, like a physio device. I think you can buy them on Amazon and that kind of thing. But even if you don't have that, if you just ring up a towel, something that'll give you a bit of flexibility but a bit of resistance in it, and then what you do is you just get your hands on it and you do the twisting motion like this. Okay, and you just do maybe, I don't know, 10-15 minutes of that, just sitting on the sofa, just work it, just twist. And the way to basically treat that is to keep it strong, keep it mobile effectively. But that's just working these forearm muscles. You have to remember what the forearm muscles are for. Yeah, these aren't for heavy duty things. They're for gripping. That's what controls your fingers. Okay, so if you practice this gripping method that I've talked about, really what you're doing is you're allowing your skeleton, your bones, which are much, much stronger, much sturdier, to do the stopping portion of the cut, the actual stopping portion, right? So when you're in Jordan and the sword is above your head, the same mechanics are holding the sword in place. I don't have to use any muscles really. I can relax my forearm a bit. Within reason, obviously the pinky's got to have a bit of tension in it, because otherwise the sword's just going to fall down, right? But it means that all these fingers and my thumb, they're relaxed. So the vast majority of the muscle tissue in my forearm is relaxed. Same thing happens in Chudan. When you're in Kamai, in Chudan Kamai, there should be a gap here, nice natural gap. Yeah, I'm only just feeling the weight of the sword with the right hand. And with the left hand, it's there too. When I'm in Chudan, there is a bit of a gap here, because I've got leverage in that little finger and underneath this bone. That's what's holding the sword. That's what's carrying the sword. And so when you do the cut and it comes to a stop, it's your bones that are doing the stopping, and they're much stronger, so they can bear that load. And what that does is it frees your wrist up a bit, so that it's not so loaded with tension at the moment that you start to roll the fingers and kind of point the grip forward, if that makes sense. Yeah, so as you're doing the cut and finishing, it's forward, not up and over. Okay, but that's basically it. That is the key to getting on top of these wrist issues. Gripping the sword correctly from the top and from the bottom, if that makes sense, not from the sides. Okay, so really work on your wrist alignment. When you're in Chudan, it's not from there, it's from there. Okay, get your wrists in and behind the Shinai. Okay, I hope that helps. If there's any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And until next time, take care. Bye bye.